that, I would now like to move on to the crux of this particular dialogue, which is the keynote addresses by our four speakers here. Moving forward, I would like to invite Mr. Peyush Agarwal, Managing Director, Design It, who's been there for more than 2 decades in this design industry and who's built and led diverse consulting as well as in-house teams designing innovation, business strategies, and product service ecosystem for MPS organizations around the world. Mr. Agarwal founded the award-winning Design at Bangalore studio, a Wipro company, now as a part of the global designer team of 800 plus creative strategists around across 18 locations. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal, to share your perspective on creating performant teams that represent the case of diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Um, this is an amazing platform, and I believe that this is a great equalizer in a way that we all can attend and participate from across the world. No longer the cost of travel stands in the way of participating, with diverse voices. So with that, I want to share a little bit. So I will put on a presentation, and it is not a heavy one. It just has some points that you can look at while I'm talking about it. Hopefully you can see the screen. My name is Peyush. And as Pooja introduced, I lead Design It for the region. Design It is a strategic design firm, and we work on product service ecosystems around the world. Um, I've been practicing design for about 25 years. I'm an architect by training. I worked in the US for a while and now in India for a while. Over these years, I've had a lot of opportunity to build design teams. Almost every place I have worked, I have had the reason to either build a new design team or augment a one that exists, or even have developers and product managers, project managers, and people of various different disciplines as a part of the organizations I've built. And what I want to share with you are essentially findings and my learnings on this journey to create, more equitable, more diverse workspace and our work environment, home environment, all of that. And some principles that I've found to be true that require you to do work, but if you stick to them, they can enable you to move on the path to diversity. So this is one of those talks, one of the keynotes, strange ones, where if you disagree with my point of view, then I really encourage you to hang in there for the next 20 minutes and hear me out. And then we can have a dialogue in this session or later on or whenever, right? So this is where I hope to demonstrate the value and the way forward in creating performant teams. So let me just start with what design is. Design, to me, this is a great definition. It is the human capacity to shape and make our environments in a way that is utilitarian and it is satisfying to the soul, right? Which means it is both utilitarian and about aesthetics. And it is a human capacity. It is not a man's capacity, not a woman's capacity, not a person of some type's capacity. So the ability to create is a capacity that resides in all of us. Now, if that is true, then we must recognize that design needs are as diverse as the challenges facing businesses, humans, and our whole planet. So, 20 years ago, we were focused on building big organizations, and I was in the US, and you could see that happening, widespread. But then over time, we have all realized, and particularly with this series of lockdowns and the pandemic issues, we have all realized that we need to focus on people. This had already been moving. And then you realize that it's not just fixing problems for people or organization, it's the whole planet we are talking about. Ecology, economic systems, how do you price the value of fuel and calories and things like that? Everything is now global. So design process by its nature is inclusive because it recognizes that various voices need to be part of the conversation. If that is true, if as designers, and by designers I'm going to use this term very very loosely, it is about creators of all stripes. If you write code, if you write legislature, you are a designer. If you deal with politics, you are a designer. All activities are an expression of design. So if all of that is true, then shouldn't teams of creators, designers, engineers, field force, your ops, governments, all of them, shouldn't they reflect the human diversity they're responsible to design for, to create for? Is that not the right logical argument? And I would go so far as to say that if this doesn't work for you, because this doesn't talk about money and impact and things like that, this sounds too soft. If that didn't convince you, then just Google effect of diversity on workplace performance. And you'll see reports upon reports upon reports that keep talking about how diversity provides competitive advantage to organizations of all kinds. Now, rest of my point of view is not going to be about convincing people that diversity is important. I believe with this we are done. We can look up any number of searches and we can find all kinds of data. So the question is, how do we do that? And what I have seen, what works for me, what, and we are still learning. I'm still learning, but I want to share with you 5 principles, 5 actionables that you can employ, which will enable you to have more diverse teams. What does diversity even mean, though? When first thing can be gender diversity, male versus female. But I submit to you that that is the tip of the iceberg. That is just the beginning. You can have educational diversity. People who have, you go to LinkedIn, people will say X IMA, X this, X that. What are they doing? They are letting it known that they belong to a certain kind of rarefied air. So education can mean exclusion. Education can also mean inclusion. And then you have people who have education of all kinds, right? So education, sexuality, LGBTQIA, I mean, and we would be remiss if we ever thought this is a first world issue. This is not an India issue. It is a human issue. It exists everywhere. It depends on our willingness to recognize it. Ability, we think in terms of disability that we can see. People who cannot see, people who cannot hear, or um, have some obvious difference that we can tag on as a difference in ability. What I want you to take away is think about the fact that there's disability that you cannot see. Somebody may have one kidney. They may have had a kidney transplant. They may have a heart condition that you will not know. There are many kinds of things that you cannot tell. And so it is, you got to be really careful that you don't end up tagging disability as something that you can see. I'll give you another example. About 10% of human male population has some form of color blindness. That can really impact on small things to catastrophic things, not being able to differentiate between traffic lights, for example. So those things don't just show up. So you got to be really careful in your mind when you think of ability. It comes in many ways and in many forms. India is a young country. We got half the population is under the age of 35 and 25 and 30 and so forth. So it stands to reason that when new companies are formed, and if it is formed by young people, they tend to have a lot of other young people working in them. Uh, this is fine, except you are leaving on the table the great experience that so many people with in older age groups that they have accumulated. And it would be a shame if we just didn't even consider them, particularly in risky ventures where you could use somebody's experience a little bit more. Um, Gender, well, we have talked about male versus female. There's a lot of voices out there who feel at times that we shouldn't have too many women. They get married and they will leave their jobs, or if they get pregnant, then we are out of a person. And I would say this view absolutely needs an update. You got to really look at the way the world is functioning right now. We are all working from our homes. So if we work from our homes, it doesn't matter if you're going to get married and move away or not. It is immaterial to work. And there are many other things that are immaterial here. We just have to be careful that we are not wearing glasses that just don't provide you any focus. Ethnicity, culture, language, India is a mix of many, many countries in a way. We got to make sure that when we hire and when we train people and we have people delivering the work that we need, they're not shortlisted, pre-selected because of these factors. This is a really huge mistake if we make it. We are cutting out rest of the population, class, race, and more, right? So there are many ways you can be diverse. But here's what I want you to do. If you're starting out on this journey, or if you think you are somewhere along, or you want to figure out how to get going, first is look within, introspect, examine your fears and biases, figure out whether they're fears, whether they're biases, or whether they are actual truths manifesting. Um, you know, is your view that an older person will have issues reporting to a younger person automatically only because they're old? Is your view that a person with disabilities will slow the team down? I already talked to you about disabilities you can't see, so you might hire a person and then eventually discover that they have a health condition. So what does that leave you? What about a single parent? If we talk everything as disability, wouldn't that be a disability? But that's not how it works. The point is you got to look at the diversity data. You got to look at what kind of voices you're missing. Um, and review the impact of lack of diversity on your norms, behavior, how people interact. How does your organization deal with each other? And you have to envision a future. You have to know as a leader what future you want your organization to be in. And that is your goal. And then you examine your readiness. Um, I will tell you upfront, this is not for the faint of heart. If you like being in your office and you don't want to be disturbed certain hours of the day, and you want to keep some distance between the people you lead and yourself, then this process is not for you. This requires that we be hands-on. As leaders, we need to be hands-on. We got to be honest to ourselves. Are you okay reducing power distance? Now, power distance is really strong in India. That's a phenomena where people who report to each other feel the distance between each other, right? How accessible leaders are. Do you have a truly functional and safe feedback mechanism? Are you inviting voices, but are you truly ready to listen what they have to say? Because it can be that what they say you may not like. And then our human tendency is to shut it down right away. And you have to really fight that. Is your team ready to deal with it? Or do they feel this is some level of eccentricity that you're gotten into and now we have to deal with it? You really have to make sure that your team that speaks your voice is aligned to this. Or really, let's admit, are we just saying that, hey, I would like to do it, but man, it is too much work, or I'm not ready to deal with these questions, right? You have to really do a lot of introspection and examine your readiness. This, sometimes I see that when there's a big effort, people go, okay, we need to make sure that we hire 3 women. We need to make sure we have n number of distribution in our teams. So I will not speak to any reservation policies or quotas that happen, in work, in government and all of that. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is we got to lead by creating an environment where diverse people can join us and work with us without quotas. If you have to push for quotas, that means that either there are not enough qualified people of a certain type available, or more importantly, maybe our hiring and promoting and managing mechanisms, sift them out of the system. They don't like it. It doesn't work for them. So they don't show up. So you have to really start with who you are and where you are and how do you do this. This, I've experienced it myself over many years, doing different things. And then you realize that the worst misses are the signals you don't even receive. So you don't know what you don't know. So depending on how you project your hiring policies, how do you interview, you may or may not even capture diversity to come in the first place. Your funnel may not even capture them. So if they're not in the funnel, they'll not show up in your workplace. So it becomes a, see, that kind of introspection becomes a real challenge, because lack of signal can sometimes mean there is nothing out there, or lack of signal can sometimes mean that your capturing mechanism doesn't have the ability to capture signals that may exist. So how do you crack that? And you must always consider that this is not a sacrifice against business competitiveness, and it's not charity. This really is in service of improving your ability to compete directly. So, for example, when you think of assignments, and this we have done with great success, so I can talk about it super confidently. Um, at DesignEd, and this I'm just talking just the last few years even, we had a situation where we needed to send a team to Australia. They were going to live away from family and everything. And interestingly, the leads were not single people who would be jumping at the opportunity to go to a different country and have a good time. These were married people. In this case, two women who were married, and their husbands and their families, and all of those are in the mix. And they had to go away for 2 months. And there, they have to live out of a hotel, out of a suitcase for 2 months. So it can be fun the first week, second week, and very soon it can become really boring and monotonous. And actually, nobody is super jumped about going there for that long if you're not going to live, comfortably. So one answer was, we could have simply assumed for them and said, hey, you know what? They have a family and all. I don't think they'll want to go. One of them also has a child. And we could have simply taken a call on their behalf and said, hey, you know what? I don't think this would be the right assignment for them, even though from ability and competency, they are the right fit. But what did we do? We offered the opportunity to them. And we said, hey, this is the opportunity. This is what it'll take. And we would be super happy if you went because you're the right fit. One of them took a couple of days to think. They spoke to their family and everything. But then, luckily for us, she came back and said, yes, she will do it. You know what? That was a fantastic decision. She was great at the job. She stayed there for the length of that duration. She came back, then she led the team from here with developers in Pune and client in Australia. And we did the whole thing, no problem at all. And had we assumed on their behalf that it would not be a good fit, it would be a shame all around. We would have tried to force fit some other person in the role who would not have worked very well. Essentially, I would have to do more work in the project because my lead cannot handle it as well. It is just negative all around. So absolutely, when you have a project in mind, don't assume, offer, and then check how they are planning to be successful. Be supportive. Don't plan for them. Don't solve their problem for them. Everybody is an adult and they resent being looked at differently from others. Actually, people don't want to be treated differently. Absolutely not. They just want the playing field to be such that people with all kinds of situations can play. I had one person, a lady who declined the job because this would require a lot of commute versus her current job, which was not a lot of commute. And so she just declined it. Then I followed up with her and said, hey, you declined it. Tell me why. She said, hey, I have a young child and commute will take extra time. And I can't remove that time away from him. So we offered that she could leave early to take that extra commute so she can be at home the same time and she can do work disjointedly later. That's all it took. It turned out that was the big barrier. And if we removed it, she was happy to come on board. And I can tell you, she's one of our top performers. In fact, it would have been such a shame if we just took no for an answer and didn't even check why. So sometimes these barriers exist on both ends, and employees and employers both have gone through this situation and they all have prejudices built in. So really important to really reconsider that. One other real quick thing, you have to hire for values match, not culture fit. Culture fit means, and we used to do that, and I will say we have changed it over the past few years. We used to check for can I have a coffee with this person? It turned out into the person who was hired here first gets to choose whether they can have coffee with somebody, right? So they'll end up choosing the same people, the people who are like them, have the same life experience, uh, and it becomes a monotonous team. So what we did, we have changed it to say, can you find evidence of one or more of these values? What are those values? Are they collaborative, helpful? Are they autonomous? Do they produce high quality work? Do they push limits? Do they care for clients? Do they have big smiles and small egos? Are they playful? Things that are important to us. These are values. These are not whether I can have coffee with this person, right? And when you have commonly shared values, they enable really good behavior, really important trust and performance based outcomes. So it is really important that you evaluate whether you're doing a culture fit or you're doing a values match. And finally, you have to walk the talk. All this thing is worth nothing if you are not willing to look at the full employee life cycle and across all daily operations, from describing job descriptions to hiring processes to how you do assign opportunities, how do you run meetings. Are you okay coming in late into your meetings when your team is meeting and you're okay with that? But would you be as okay if your reportees also showed up late into your meetings? So it goes all ways. And it requires that you announce your intentions and hold yourself and the org accountable for it in the open. Correct behavior. If you see some incorrect behavior, you fix it in the moment. Once I noticed a team member address people as bachas because a lot of juniors, and immediately we had a conversation. And it was not accusatory or yelling or anything, but I just told him, hey, let's not do this. Everybody's a professional. And boom, it was fixed, not an issue. And we have young people, old people, doesn't matter, right? And you have to face uncomfortable questions with immediacy. There are things that you can control, things you can't, and oftentimes things will happen that you can control only so much. So you got to be really open with the team and ask for their help to make the space more diverse. You got to monitor for stickiness. And finally, you got to realize that once you start on this journey, it'll require making a fundamental shift. It'll change the makeup of your teams, culture, behavior, norms. Transition can sometimes be painful, sometimes it'll be delightful. Most team members, I can guarantee you that, will be relieved that we are moving in this new direction. But you will find some people who will have trouble doing this, changing how they deal with people. So in that case, look at the 5 principles I just described and take it from there with them. So either they will be with you or they will be not, but you need a team that works to these principles, works to diversity. Because remember, you're not doing this for charity, you're doing it to get better business results. So with that, I'll pause here. Here's my LinkedIn profile. If you have questions, if we don't cover them now, feel free to write to me there. Feel free to find this post and tag on to your questions there. And with that, thank you so much for your time and attention. If there are questions, I would love to take them. And this is something I'm very passionate about, so I can keep going on and on. But Professor Vyas and Pooja, I hope you'll keep me on track and short. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Peyush. It was very engaging talk, and in fact, you covered very important points. I must say that the broad spectrum which you have touched upon, meaning that human-centric focus, or how this whole work environment which we are talking about, or related with the gender-specific issues, actually most of these points which you have touched upon. Now, I just want to bring in one point which Mr. Udyan Malhotra brought in. You see, you mentioned about the qualified people, and somewhere now this qualified people definition is, we have defined that what makes it qualified, and many times you will talk, my mother is illiterate because she studied only up to fifth standard or seventh standard. Will you call her unqualified? On what parameters you will call? So I think country like ours, we have lost the opportunity of using the talents who have so much tacit knowledge. And this aspect which Mr. Udyan Malhotra touched upon, that how in their very high-end precision manufacturing, how the crafts people who are doing a very fine work. In fact, one example which we are talking about, that the ivory workers who are doing such a precision work, and they have suddenly become jobless because ivory is out of meaning as per the rule you can't do, and then they are going to cities and running the auto rickshaws. How will you tap that talent? I think this is what one is looking, how sensitive we are to pick up the talent and make it more inclusive rather than putting it in compartment whether the person is qualified or not. Now this is a complete paradigm shift in Indian context if you talk about. And in my opening thing I did talk about language also. If you don't know English, are you included or not? So the loss of talent, the people who are domestic help in our house, we see they are so talented, but they have not been in a mainstream. And somewhere in our productive environment, we have lost some opportunity. So, what would you like to reflect on these points?
Yeah, Professor Vyas and Udyanji, you have put up some really tough points for me to say that we have a way to fix it now. But I will submit this. I completely agree. Uh, Part of the challenge is that all of us have different areas of work that require different kind of skills. So, for example, in my world right now, things are more digital than they are physical. So maybe we can't use artisans who use their hands, for example. But what we have been able to do very successfully, and it's been amazing, is that we have moved our hiring process from deciding that we will go to top design schools to hire. And by the way, not knocking on the design schools, they are great and everything is fine. So that part is fine. But what we have done is we have turned our hiring process into a national talent search of sorts. So what we, and this I'm describing only in context of trying to find those untapped gems. So what we have found is once we announce it, say a LinkedIn or somewhere, we'll announce the job and we'll say, we'll not talk about degrees. We will ask for competencies and abilities. We ask for ability to do X and Y, and we don't say how you learned it. And the second thing is in the hiring process, we evaluate by an exercise that we provide, take home exercise. So it takes the candidate's time, but it absolves them from having a design degree, design education, what background. We have found a person who is going to a no name brand technical school, some IT degree. She is not into that, but she worked hard to create her own portfolio, her own skill, and she interviewed with us and she passed. She's a fantastic hire. There's another person who's been working theoretical physics, and again, these are not people who don't have education. We have also had people who left their design degrees in second year because of something, and normally they would not be hireable at a lot of formal companies because they don't have a bachelor's degree. So we have really pushed the org and we have found great talent who may not be designers, great talent who may not even have degrees, and still great talent who are studying something but are passionate about something. And here we are able to give them an opportunity. And actually, opportunity is ours. We are able to tap into a much wider population.
Yes, you're right. So, Mr. Malhotra, would you like to add anything in this?
I think, firstly, Peyush, well done. That was very nice because you've very eloquently given an example of both tapping into diversity and being inclusive, and applause to you. Well done.
Thank
Just
you.
to talk about what we do here, the tacit knowledge is so important. You know, we have married together artisans from villages in India who do the cutting edge of aerospace work, for all the global aerospace players making and assembling flight critical products. Now, these are unique human skills that are increasingly becoming rarer and rarer as the world. I mean, today, young kids in Germany and Italy and France who did this work a generation ago don't want to touch products with their hands. They want to touch buttons. So we have designed, and I think it informs our design of our organization. We put together in our company robotic manufacturing in the UK, where we manufacture parts with complete digital robotic manufacturing, and we assemble them in India, and it creates a global best value. And I think this is, all of us have these opportunities to be inclusive, get diversity, bring in all these skills with these diverse human beings, and then create new value, which is allowing design to drive profitability of institutions and organizations. I think it's a very it's a self, it pays for itself. And again, thank you, Pradyumna, for leading with this. Thanks.
Thank you. We are running short of time, but I think there is one question from Sonam. Uh, is there any data available on these diversity of skills? If yes, where can we find it? If no, then how can we move forward towards creating one? Sonam, did you get
Um,
it, Piyush? Sonam,
yes. I'm just reflecting on it. I think the context might help a little bit. So, skill diversity, I mean, you go around the web and you search and you find so much. Really, the question is, how do you map examples like Professor Vyas gave, right? An erstwhile um, Hathinath worker who's now ivory worker is doing some job that doesn't require that level of help, that level of finesse, right? So the question really is, it should be driven from what is the task you need done, and then you do somewhat of a design thinking exercise to figure out what kind of lateral skills exist in the world that could map to that level of work that you need, right? So they may not be used to working with ivory, or they may be used to working only with ivory, for example, but the attitude of going super detailed and super accurate, that is what you want. A hand-eye coordination is what you want. So you have to really look at laterally. So I mean, in my mind, it's not so much a library of lists, a library of diversity lists, but it's diverse skills, but it's more like what problem you need solved and how can you laterally think about opportunities for people who may be doing something, some attribute of that you can totally use. I don't know, does that make
uh,
sense, Professor Vyas,
I,
Udhayanji?
I think, but otherwise, Sonam will get in touch with you afterwards. I will, Vasan, he is a very bright graduate of ours, so he's doing a lot of this interesting work. Pooja, unfortunately, we are slightly running behind the schedule. Piyush, so you stay with us, and I will go back to Pooja to introduce the next speaker.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you, Professor Vyas. Thank you, Mr. Peyush Agarwal, and thank you, Mr. Udyan Malhotra, for being there with us for the session till now. Moving